kitchen chaos to well-oiled machines. Get ready for newfangled technology and old-school know-how. Stories and a good bit of fun. I'm Simon, and this is Culinary Mechanic. Joining me today is Jen Quist of Wishwell. Jen, welcome to Culinary Mechanic.
Hi, Simon. Thanks for having me. So happy to be here.
Absolutely. I'm so happy you're here. I think it's worth noting you and I met through a group, um, and it's kind of, a group of people that are working to find their way doing consulting in the hospitality business.
Mhm.
And when you and I started talking and figuring out how we could do this episode, I started looking into your website and things you've done in the past. And I gotta tell you right off the bat, whoever you does the pictures for your website, that person is awesome. Like I
I'm
was staring
lucky.
at your website going, those are such pretty spaces.
I know.
And the
It's like
pictures are
three or four
amazing.
photographers that I've consistently worked with over, 15 years, and I love them all dearly.
Oh,
I'm very
hired.
lucky to have that. I know.
Yes.
I know. It like
Hired.
makes my website. People always like comment about my website, and I know it's just the photography. That's all it is.
Fuck, who cares what it that's shit's
I know. I
amazing.
know. It's great.
I
I
love
know.
it.
I'm
I'm
very
sorry. I
lucky.
don't mean to get off track, but like I just remembered like a week ago looking at it going, I love those
Thank you.
spaces.
Yeah. Yeah.
So good job.
Thank you.
Let's press on the gas because it's culinary mechanic and say,
Love it.
how'd you get into this industry?
As I'm sure everyone has, their own long story, but I won't make it too long. Well, first, I was a server in college. And I went to college up in Seattle, which is where you are, right? Do
Yes.
you know Varlamo's Pizzeria? Have you ever heard of it?
I feel like I've driven by it.
It's over near UW. So
Okay.
I
Yep.
was a server there all through college, loved it, but it didn't seem like it was going to be my path. And then I got into the startup world and real estate in San Francisco, but I always had friends who were opening restaurants and I was like fascinated by it, but again, not my path. And then when the market changed at one point, I realized that that was my path. That's where I wanted to be. I loved hosting. I loved cooking. I loved, throwing parties and events and everything. And I went to culinary school a lot later in life. I did this like
Nice.
huge career change at 30, which, when you go to culinary school at 30 and you're with like 17 and 18-year olds, it's a way different experience than what they're having. And it was the best decision I've ever made. And I never looked back. Although I'm sure my parents wish I stayed in real estate. Um, and it was a game changer for me. I had found my place, like my people, everything. I and it, everything snowballed from there and everything has been a building block from there. But what it really was for me was just being around people in a different way and hospitality and hosting, as like for a career, and having connections with people and having a vision for something and bringing it to life, and then also having a business structured around it. So being in real estate, you are your own business. You're doing
Right.
everything for yourself, from the marketing to, I mean, all of your financials, like, I mean, all of those pieces. And so I went to culinary school, learned how to be a chef, worked in restaurants, did not want to be back of house. It just wasn't, I wanted to be front facing, guest facing, and I wanted to run a business. Those were the two things that I really got out of it, but I wanted to stay and, be in hospitality. And um, some things happened. I was in New York for culinary school and stayed there for about 5 years working in kitchens and also, working for different catering operations and smaller businesses and just like learning the ropes inside and out. And then had an opportunity to move to Portland to support this basically like an investment fund that had a restaurant portfolio and they knew nothing about restaurants. And by that time, like I had found some like footing in the industry
Yeah.
and they basically were like, if you can take these four restaurants that we have that are dying, but institutions, and bring them to profitability, we'll fund your first restaurant. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but that's the short version. And that's
Works.
what happened. I brought them to profitability in 6 months, cleaned up a bunch of stuff, put systems in place. And so then I went on this, journey to open my first restaurant in Portland, which was, it was called Ripple. And it was a sustainable seafood restaurant.
Cool.
And it was my greatest learning experience to date. Like nothing, if you ask me why I still do what I do and why I do what I do now, everything starts with Ripple for a million reasons. So that's how I got into it. That's how I've stayed in it. And that was over 15 years ago. So close to 20 years at this point. So
Nice.
yeah.
Couple things you said that I wanted to kind of go back and touch on because
Mhm.
they are things that have rung true in my career. Number one, going to culinary school at 30, I think is like you were not the first one I've heard say that. And I think that the folks that I've heard that I know a number of people who went at like 26, 27 years old, but they'd already been in the business for a while, just soaking up kind of a little bit of do's and don'ts, but also some life wisdom.
Sure.
And I mean, I think it's amazing. Like you go back at 30, you already have a sense of, I think you have a greater sense of what you want to get out of it. And I think that,
Definitely.
yeah, I mean, so many of the students that I've seen, and I can honestly say that when I started my career in the kitchen, culinary school wasn't in vogue.
Yeah.
As I became like as I got farther in, and about the time I became a sous chef and was now starting to hire cooks, now we're in 2005, 2007, that kind of that era when all of a sudden there's just cordon bleus popping up
Sure.
everywhere in the
Yeah.
country. And it became this thing that was like, and it lasted a good long time of
Hmm.
oh, I'm gonna be I just got out of culinary school. I'm ready to be a sous chef. I'm like, you have no fucking clue what you're ready to
So true.
do. You're ready to peel carrots
Totally.
for 3 hours.
Well, it was just like at that time, it was so hyped up on TV. Like it was just becoming something that everyone was like, everyone always has this very romanticized view of what we do, but it was just like on steroids at that point,
Yeah,
and that's why
yeah,
everyone wanted to go to culinary school. I mean,
yeah.
probably factored into why I wanted to go, but you're right. I mean, I took school so seriously. I mean, I didn't miss a day. I had my like flashcards. Like I dove in so hard because I was older. Like and I needed to get out of it what I needed to get out of it. Like it was a
Right.
career move for me versus just like hopping in at 18.
Yeah, you know, I I went to college for 1 semester and I was at UMass Amherst and I instantly knew I was like, these are not
Not me.
my people.
Hmm.
This is just not the way that like I worked hard in high school and I had a really high GPA and school was always kind of easy. I enjoyed it and like, I loved math and I loved science and English was okay, but like all that stuff was fairly simple and you just do it and be done. And I was like, wait, and now you want me to pay how much to do this?
Yeah,
I
no
don't know
kidding.
about that. And I think for me, like another thing you mentioned was like the people and the community. And that's what got me into the industry. So I totally understand like how that becomes a thing that like not my path, not my path. Oh, check it out, is my path. So I love
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Um, I also love the fact that like you talk about all the different aspects of running the business. And I
Hmm.
think that for me, so many times it's the glamour of creativity, which I have a handful of stories of how creativity is not glamorous. And
Yeah,
but
for sure.
it's that whole like, wait, I have to create how much on demand?
Yeah.
You want how many new specials in a week? Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's entirely different. I think, um, yeah, as you talk about like kind of grabbing all those pieces of your working life and career, and then it's amazing. Like someone says, "Here, come do this with us," and 6 months later, you've really got a handle on things. I think
Hmm.
that's amazing. Um, tell us. Tell us how that. So you said that Ripple was kind of was truly its own. Oh, I'm losing the word here. Ripple was its own ripple.
Riffle,
To
it's with
bring you
S.
to bring you for
Yeah.
riffle to bring you
Yeah.
to where you are now. So tell us how that like what does that quantum leap look like to get you to Wishwell?
I mean, and there's just been so much in between, obviously. But what that taught me was I've developed a lot of concepts, over the last couple of decades. Um, but that was my favorite. I mean, it was just like such a vision and it was such a passion. It was linked to like I grew up fly fishing, we were so close to the coast, like all of these things. But it was a vision. And I mean, it was like a beautiful brand and design and all of these things. But like I talk about, that I was like had all of these elements of running a business, but I didn't put them into play enough. Like it was this romanticized view, like I mentioned, and
Right.
that's why, so many of our creations don't work out because we don't think about, the foundation and the structure underneath and what that really means. I mean, like our wine was on point, our cocktails, our service was incredible, but like running the business and really keeping my eye on that, um, you know, wasn't the only reason that it didn't work out in the end, but it was a big part of it. And I realized kind of like what you said before of like, someone coming out of culinary school and being like, I want to be a sous chef. And it's like, no, there's so many, you just like missed all of these boxes that you need to check in order to get there, And I feel like I opened my first restaurant and I did just that. And I felt like, I was in Portland and this was like 2011. And so this is when Portland was really like gaining its momentum, as
Right.
with our food culture and our restaurant culture. And I was just watching these like kids open restaurants left and right, myself being one of them, where there wasn't a lot of structure, and there wasn't like a business sense. It was all of this vision and creativity, but there wasn't anything to hold it all together. And so that's when I really started like diving hard into the stuff that, isn't as fun probably, although I can debate that. But it's
Yeah.
like it was just like a mind shift for me where I was like, okay, if I want to stay in this and if I want to have longevity in this, I need to figure out all of the pieces of how this works. And if I want to open a restaurant again someday, which it took me like probably, I don't know, 8 years to do it again. I just operated for other people for so long and, opened a
Right.
lot of places and, really helped others do it. And so I was like learning through that and like putting the pieces together. But, if I wanted to open again, which I did because I loved it so much, I needed to really get, experience under my belt. And so I just took that with me. Again, like when I talk to people about developing a concept. It's not just this like a bunch of pretty pictures, with this vision. It's like, what does your pro forma look like? What is your opening plan? What is your marketing plan? All of these pieces that like if you want to have a shot at the hardest industry, I think that there is, there has to be a really solid plan in place. It's not just passion, although you have to have that too. Like
Yes.
that's I mean, we're all crazy if we don't have that, like what are we doing here? But, it's that just became so clear to me. And the loss was so big losing that restaurant. So it lasted for about a year and a half. And again, there were so many factors into why it didn't stay open, even though it was successful. Like, we had tons of press and national recognition and all of this stuff. It was a big chunk of it was that foundation wasn't there. And so I never wanted someone else to go through that. Like I wanted to start helping people figure out ways to create a sustainable business model, that also connected to the community and that, was like something that became like essential to the city that it's in and, woven into the fabric. So like people would be just devastated without it, and return and support it. So it was like all of these pieces that have just
Huh.
been kind of building on one another to get to where I am today and why I continue to do this.
I don't know about you, but I did not get into the restaurant business to spend all my time in a cramped little office. I love being in the kitchen, out on the floor. And if you're nodding your head right now, I want to introduce you to an amazing company called Starfish. Look, I've gotten to know their CEO, Jordan, recently, and what they're building really impresses me. They're using AI to read your P&L, and they're going to email you actionable insights every week so you can lower your costs and increase revenue. Best part is you don't have to spend time digging through your P&Ls, poring over reports in that cramped little office. Starfish is going to do that for you so you can get back to the part of the business that you love. If you're interested, go to their website, use starfish.com. That's USE starfish.com. And tell them Simon sent you. Huh. I don't know if I mean, as emotionally connected as I am to a lot of my past jobs in restaurants and institutions that I've been able to be a part of, I don't know if I've ever thought about like the emotional connection that a guest truly has that then says, I not only do I need to go there next week, but I need to come back. And I think that's a really great thing to sit and kind of ponder. I think there's a whiskey in my future with that sort of idea in mind, you know, because
Yeah, I mean,
it's important.
it's it's so critical. And like that's the thing, I talk about this all the time. It's like we are so consumed with what's within our four walls and like what we can control. And
Mhm.
obviously, again, like all of those pieces are so important, but like what is right outside your four walls is what keeps you in business, And so like listening to your guest, connecting with your guest, all of those pieces. And, and again, like Riffle was like the perfect example of that because I mean, I'm still close to the majority of my staff from again, like 15 years ago. I'm still
Right.
close to regulars that we had because we connected with people, so much. So it actually was a really great example of when it did close, like people were so sad and devastated by it. But again, getting back to like the foundation of it wasn't there. But I saw how important that was, like community and connection. Like, that was so critical in the parts of it that were very successful.
Yeah, I mean, for me, culinary mechanic as a consulting advisory sort of entity, I really like I kind of drone on about those things with some of my clients because I'm like, first of all, like let's get past all the sexy stuff and let's get to the
Yeah.
non-sexy stuff that nobody wants to talk about. Nobody really wants to
Yeah.
talk about like purchasing, purchasing
Yeah.
well, receiving, nobody wants to talk about the fact that like
So true.
are you weighing tomatoes as they come in the back door?
Hmm. So
It's the
true.
and when I say that to certain chefs, they're like, "What are you fucking nuts?" I'm like, "I
Yeah.
don't know. You want to stay in business or not? Because it's pennies."
I'm, I
And
mean,
it, and then the list goes on, right? Of all
yeah,
those little things that are so crucial.
totally.
Like you said, the foundation. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
Well,
cut you off
and
there.
no, 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 no. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but like, I know that that's, who you work with. And I always joke, like, I've spent my career wrangling chefs and bartenders. Like,
Mm,
that's been my job is like keeping everyone in line. And the amount of bartenders are different. They're like, so like, I feel like meticulous that I can get them to like cost things pretty easily. But obviously in kitchens, it's so much more. But finding chefs who can cost and having those conversations, I have had so many of them, in my career and yeah, it's what keeps you in business, but it's not what anyone wants to talk about or work
no.
on. They just want to focus on their vision. And it's like you're going to get so much further in life if you, have all of these pieces, in your arsenal of like what you can deliver like in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, I had to explain it to somebody recently, and I said, you view all of the things that you like to do as the things that you got to do to stay in business, and I view it differently. And he said, "Huh?" And I said, "How about this? If you don't handle the business, then you're not going to get to spend 4 hours figuring out how that cute little dish goes together. You're not going to
Yep.
get to spend hours with the rep who comes in who has the new line of plates because you want to spend thousands of dollars on cool new plates. Like you don't
Hmm.
get to do that stuff
Hmm.
unless you handle the fundamentals and and I think that I think this is the half a second of every episode where I bash Gordon Ramsay and Bobby Flay for a half a second and say, hey man, it's not just about like poof, and it's not about yelling and screaming to get results. It's like, how do you motivate this group of people who may or may not have a ton of culinary skill, because in this day and age it's all really weird, right? But how do you get that team, even if they're totally focused and love to cook, how do you get them to do it exactly the way you want, time in, time out? How do you get all of the product to come to the back door in the state that you want and that you can actually work with, rather than, wait, who let that in? Why are those mushrooms soggy looking? Like, what happened?
Totally.
Oh, I didn't realize I needed to check. Yes, you need to check everything. Like, otherwise, like,
Right.
otherwise you're handing money to somebody and just saying, do whatever you want. And there's no other, like, you wouldn't do that when you went to the clothes store. You wouldn't say, I want the ripped one, but people somehow they get all crazy. But
Yeah, I
at
mean
the end of the
it's
day, it's the non-sexy things that really set us up to be able to do the fun stuff, right? To be able to greet the guest at the front door that's been coming to your restaurant for whatever, a year, 2 years, once a week, to be able to give that warm greeting. You
Mhm.
don't do the fundamentals, you don't get to have the fun.
Totally. I mean, and if you don't consider those people, then you don't have a business, right? Like, so that's the other thing. It's again, that was a big lesson for me. And, it's something that I talk about a lot. Like, we have these visions and chefs have these visions, and, we want this concept to be exactly what we want it to be. But like listening to the people who are actually coming in, and accepting that feedback and not resisting it, and, really trying to apply it in a productive way. I mean, constructive feedback is critical, and so if you're not listening, it's the same thing, like as, trying to understand what the outcome is if you don't do this, right? If you don't do this, you're not going to have a restaurant to even talk to people in. So, it's the same kind of thing. Like when I think about like guest connection and guest journey and experience and all those pieces and connecting to the community, like it sounds really light and fluffy, but it's actually what makes your business move. I mean,
Yeah,
it's the people who are
yeah.
coming in and filling the seats, right? So it's really important to consider all of that
I think
constantly.
the heart of this conversation goes back for me to one of my just crazy pet peeves of the last couple of years, and that is, you know, with Michelin coming into the United States, everybody's talking about Michelin star chefs and this and that, and I think about like James Beard award-winning restaurants and chefs. And if you're really old enough, you can remember Zagat if you were in the right cities,
Mhm.
and I think about those. And nothing kills me more than to go, oh, look at that hot restaurant that you're driving by, and you're like, man, they've won awards and they're doing all this great stuff, and then 18 months later they're shut. That just
Yeah,
there's nothing that like sends my heart into this like spastic place more than
totally.
that. It's like, wait,
I know.
what? You have all this talent, you did all this thing, and you can't make this. Wait a second,
The
you
eye is on
know?
the wrong ball, I mean, and that's the thing. And I think that that's why, like I love doing what I do because it's not like the fault of someone necessarily. People have tunnel vision so much of the time. It's like we can help kind of look at the bigger picture and redirect, or like channel that energy into a couple of things versus one, and really support the vision. The vision doesn't have to go away, but like it just needs to be structured differently or considered differently, But yeah, that's devastating and it happens way more
All the
often
time,
than not. Yeah.
all the time. I
And
mean,
I
and
mean,
Ah,
yeah. No, I know. I
you
couldn't
right
agree with
there.
you
I'm
more.
just like,
Again,
ah,
yeah, I mean, I've closed three restaurants of my own in my career, and two of them are really, I think, COVID related. But again, going back to Ripple, like they stay with you. It's just devastating when
yeah.
that happens, and it's way more our reality than it isn't. So that is why I love what we do, because I mean, I think we're there to like, help to prevent that from happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a little over 10 years ago, I signed up with a company, and these guys were like the like just stone cold operators. I mean, Southwestern Mexican food, and we like honestly, I used to joke all the time. I'm like, every business you walk into has a bunch of dials, and occasionally you'll get one where it's like overall food quality is dialed up to 10, or hospitality is dialed up to 10, or wow, it's a faster pace, so speed is dialed up to 10. And this company, they dialed everything to 11, man. And so I got to work with this group of like super hyper focused individuals. And as I've come out of that in the last couple of years, I look around and I'm like, huh, not everybody works at this level. Like we
Yeah.
were pulling blood out of a stone on a daily basis. It
Mm.
was practically a tap. And it was amazing, and I'm so glad I did it. But then now that I actually go and talk to other chefs, I'm like, okay, so you you've been around for 10 years. This is a true story. You've been around for 10 years. What do you think is your biggest thing you need to work on? And the chef looks at me and he says consistency. And I thought to myself, how the hell did you get this far? How the
Yeah.
hell did this
Like,
place stay
isn't
open
consistency like,
with consistency as your thing?
right.
And then you look around and you realize that everybody's having a good time at work, right? Like the cooks are having a good time. They're listening, Steve Miller's blasting in the background. Woohoo! And there's great music in the front, and the servers and the bartender are
We're
having a
happy.
good time, and the guests are having a great time. And you go, oh, and the food's pretty good. I mean, not great. It's a high side of good. And I thought, okay, that's how you do it, because you created that vibe, and you didn't let the pennies go. And so I said, so how committed
Hmm.
are you to like really working on the consistency? And he said, a full on 10. And I said, okay, we're gonna have to find the right way to like bring some of the systems that you need in without cramping the vibe, because clearly the
Hmm.
vibe is a massive part of the business. But I think that that's really interesting, right? Like a
That is
totally
really
different
interesting.
thing that I've seen. And I think that needs to be stated. Like, you can do it, but you gotta pay attention to a bunch of things, and then um, it doesn't always mean that like stellar, again, highfalutin or fancy expensive food is the way, right? Like food quality, I hate saying this out loud, but food quality doesn't have to be a 10, right?
You're
It can
right.
be about a
No,
7, and you can get away with a bunch of other things, but if you take care of the guests and they feel connected to you and they come back, um, it's the Maya Angelou quote, right? It's like how you make people feel.
right. I mean, if you think about that, I remember one time I was on a podcast a long time ago, and she said, "What do you crave?" And I said, "Sitting at a really good bar." And she was like, "I've never heard someone not say a food or drink." And I was like, "I crave the experience. Like, I crave sitting in a bar, obviously a great cocktail and I would love a martini and a burger, but like I like the sounds and the hospitality and the connection to people and all of those things. Like, that's what I crave. And that is what makes people return, more than anything else. I mean, my husband is a chef. Food is so important to us. It like, it's, I mean, it's everything, I would say, especially for him, but it's the experience that I have that's what brings us back to places, how you feel. So that's such an interesting thing to think about, like with that chef, I mean, and it's also good to have you as someone from the outside who can kind of like help him with that delicate balance, of what
Yeah.
what he needs to do. Because right, you don't want to like squeeze all of the fun out of it. Um, you know, but it's also
Well,
great that he's
and
thinking that way.
yeah, and it's interesting. It's been interesting because as I was talking about systems, and I said, here's the reality. I know that I could stuff this place with so many systems that it would choke you, and that's not my goal. However, and this is what I want listeners and watchers to grab from this conversation, honestly, is systems can be simply resources, right? Like,
Sure.
I think it's really easy to
a
say
hundred
systems
percent.
and think, oh, you're gonna have me doing checklists all day. Well, no, I might. build some of those checklists, laminate them, and stick them in the book so that if you have a new person, you have something to refer to. You have a resource, you have a reference. But it doesn't like if you have great culture, you don't have to have all the paper, right? People understand what needs to get done. But I think that systems give you that opportunity to have a checkpoint on the road to where you're going, you
Well,
know?
right. And you have to have the systems, especially if you're the operator, if you're the chef, like if you're any of the leaders, let's say, like you have to have
Yeah.
those in you to create that culture. Like you can't have good culture if you're running around like a, chicken with your head cut off. Like you have to have that stability and that structure in order to like provide a really great place for people to work. Otherwise, it's like it's either, you're dialing it up to 11, and having all of these systems, or like you got to be in the middle somewhere, so you have some stability for people to hold on to
Right.
because yeah, you're either like so constricted by the systems or you have none, like you got to go somewhere in the middle because people suffer on, either end of the pendulum.
Yeah, I mean, I think that towards the end, middle to end of my tenure with that company, I had moments of like, is this the best thing? Like this is
Yeah.
like
Oh,
this
I'm
is just
sure.
this is so hard that some of the fun seeps out the edges, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that um, that's not why I necessarily have been or am in this industry. Like, fun's important to me, you know. I think that even on a resume in circa 2010, it's like, what are your basic skills? And I put them in the middle, and I was like, having fun at work because it matters.
Well, I would have hired you on the spot if I
Mm,
saw that. I mean, genuinely, like it does
right?
matter. People. Like it just goes
Yeah.
back to that for me, I mean, is your team happy and are your guests happy? And then there's so much work to make both of those things happen. It's
Yeah.
endless, but like if that's your goal, that's success, and because again, all of the things that you're doing to make those two things happen means that you're moving forward, means that you do have systems in place, means that you are creating like that structure like within your business.
Uh, I love this conversation because it it's about people and it's about business and it's about systems. And I think that so often I was just having this conversation with somebody recently, might have been yesterday actually, and we were talking about the word corporate. We're talking about like all the connotations and this guy he is running a restaurant and catering operation and he's like I have one chef in the restaurant and he thinks that he's gonna be the next, James Beard. He's gonna just do all that stuff, but he can't get his team to execute for nothing. You go out to the catering operation, and the food looks like a perfect magazine, but they can't control labor costs. It's just all over the place. These two very dichotomous chefs that are working almost side by side. And, my guy is like, he's like, I just, he goes, maybe I have to have you come in. And I was like, well, maybe. He goes, but I can't get this guy to fill out a checklist to save his life. And he goes, and I'm not asking for all the checklists. I'm asking for like one. I'm asking for him
Yeah.
to walk down his line and like do a line check and just ensure that the quality is where he wants it. And they just
Hmm.
can't seem to do it.
Yeah.
you
I
know
mean,
and I tell him I'm like and I said why he says then here's where the corporate thing comes in he goes I don't like that stuff it's too corporate it's like man for me corporate is consistency and you can boo-hoo the fact that like Olive Garden isn't the best food in the world you know what to expect
uh-huh.
and that
I
that
mean,
for me goes back to connecting to people.
yeah, well, I always say, like, I mean, I've been hiring Olive Garden employees forever because of the way that they're trained, are the restaurants that I like run and own like Olive Garden? Not even close, but like they come out as seriously some of the best employees, I mean, and it's like you feel that that's corporate, that's called staying in business, that's called like, it's like what we were talking about before. You want this, you have to do this, and you have to see it in a way that's supporting your work. Like, it's like when I hear servers complain, or complain, whatever, not happy with things. I'm like, do you want this place to stay in business so you have a job? It's like it's important to have that structure. I keep saying that word over and over, but like it's important to
Oh,
have those things in order for a business that is so complicated. I mean, as we're talking, I have like, 10 million thoughts going through my head of like what I can say in the moment that you're saying it, that, of like an example or something, because we have so many factors in our business that have to go right every single day to make something work. And so, you have to pull it all together in
yeah,
order for it to
absolutely.
function.
I think that for me, this in the end brings up this really fun, like split in the middle, and you get people, not just chefs, but chefs and restaurateurs, and they find themselves straddling the line between an artist's mentality, right? Versus like a business mentality, and in the middle is like a craftsperson, craftsman,
Hmm.
craftswoman. And I think that like I laugh because I think back to being in my 20s and hanging out with a bunch of musicians, and they're all poo-pooing Metallica, who's selling out stadiums, and I think to myself, yeah, you're poo-pooing them, but if you were given the chance to play stadiums every night,
Right.
you really gonna tell me that you'd say no? And they're like, well, no, not really. And so
Yeah.
it's we all want to believe that, or a lot of folks want to believe that art is the highest thing, and on the complete opposite is the business, and I'm going to use Metallica one more time in this analogy to say when the lead singer of Metallica was asked if he was a sellout, he said every seat every time I play. And I think that that's pretty real, right? Like that's the business aspect of it. You wanna make money. Nobody really wants to do it. Nobody really wants to be the starving artist all the time. And I think that making money, having business somewhere in the middle, it's a craft. And we have to be able to hone that craft as you go forward. But believing that it's just art, come on now.
I know. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that's, I feel like that's like where I have found myself in what I do is, mainly it's developing concepts. And, when I first started talking about that with people, I'm developing 10 different concepts right now for different hotels. And every single conversation I've had, you know, it's like, okay, can you give me an inspiration deck? And, obviously like your market research and what you've come up with to get to this concept. And that's what I need. And I'm like, well, here's what I'm going to actually do for you. I'm going to do all of that because I love being creative. I love, developing a brand and a vision and all of those things. But I am going to get down underneath it and make sure that this functions for you, that this is something that, your food costs will make sense for your pro forma. I'm going to link it to that. I'm going to, think about how many servers or cooks it's going to take to pull this concept off. Like, I'm going to look at all of these pieces before I deliver you a pretty package. Because if I just deliver you a pretty package, it's really not going to do anything for you. And, like, that's different than an independent restaurant, but like for a hotel, a lot of the times, I mean, I could probably just do that. I could probably give them, a 15-page deck with like all of these inspirational photos and they would, be like, you did your job. But I wouldn't feel right if I did that. It's all of
Right.
these pieces under the hood that like need to actually be considered for it to function, for it to have a fighting chance out there and to make sense for, what it is that they're asking for.
Yeah. Makes sense. That'll never work.
I know. Definitely, for sure. That's very true.
All right. Let's ask some different questions here. I think that as people who straddle the line from creativity to craft to business, um, I love to find the things that kind of get our blood flowing. So what for you really like makes you wake up in the morning and go, this is the part of the work I'm most excited about.
I mean, I feel like I'm gonna forever sound like a broken record, but I like connecting with people. I think the hardest transition for me from my, last life in this industry to now is I'm used to being in restaurants and bars all day.
Mhm.
So I'm used to being around the sites, the smells, the sounds, like the people, the energy, and I like being able to work with people and to move the ball forward and connect with them. So, like, again, a lot of my work is taking so many different visions, opinions, what's needed in the market, distilling it down and creating a concept. And so, like, I love when I nail it. Like when, all of these people that I've been interacting with and sharing, brainstorming with, and like, coming up with like all of these ideas. And if I can like hone it in and bring it to a place where it makes sense, like that's such a win for me. And, that feels just like I have so done my job, and then I'm connecting with people along the way. That I love that because it still feels like I'm in the mix,
Right.
even if I'm not running an operation day to day. And so that's something I really, really love to do, is just nailing it, like, getting it right.
No, that's awesome. I think that, yeah, finding the things that really get our blood flowing and create that visceral reaction.
Yeah.
Um, I love the video aspect of these podcasts because sometimes when I'm doing this, I'm actually seeing people's like neck like throb a little bit, and they're just like pumped up, and I'm like, ah, we found it, okay. And it's
Totally. Or
obvious,
like, don't
like,
you love when everyone's like nodding, like when I'm on a call and like you just see it in somebody and you're like, I connected. I did it. I did like what I was supposed to do. I love that feeling.
yeah, um, little tidbit here is I completely understand like being a part of that company and running around. I was overseeing somewhere between 4 and 7 restaurants, kind of depending on the month. I would have 100 to 150 interactions with people in a day. And now I sit in the room with the smoky little gear behind me. Um, and I get to th like on days where I have multiple things like this or multiple, just sort of virtual coffee chats, I'm like, oh, I get to meet new people. And
Yeah.
it's
Right.
great because I miss, like I am largely virtual as far as like consulting and advising, but I still love going out to a restaurant in Seattle and talking and actually working with them. And they're like, we can do this virtually. I'm like, maybe as we get
Maybe
going and
not.
like
Right. Yeah.
maybe if I'm really busy one week, but we're still getting to know each other, and I'm going to take full advantage of the fact that like I get to come out and maybe I have lunch in your place and we can have a 5 minute conversation while we're talking about systems and leadership and hospitality and how all those things work together. We can actually talk about the Caesar salad that was You know what I
Totally.
mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't need to make that our fundamental conversation, but that's half of what I love, right? Is just getting to talk about
Absolutely.
food and God forbid you get me talking about open fire and then it's all over, right? Like,
Okay. Well, that's
oh,
another
let's burn.
conversation for us to have. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, gosh, thank you for coming to play in the sandbox because
I loved
I
it.
I love this conversation. I really appreciate you coming out. Why don't you tell us how we find you?
Uh, Wishwell, my website is thisiswishwell.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Jennifer Quist, and I'm on Instagram at Jen Quisty. Quisty was a nickname, so that's what it is. People often think my last name is Quisty. It's not. And just reach out. Like we said, I love connecting with people. I mean, I'm now trying to do like 3 in-person coffee meetings, or lunch once a week or every week, to just like get
Nice.
out there and connect with people. I miss it so much. So I just like talking to people as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I will make sure that all that information is in the show notes. To all you out
Wonderful.
there, thank you for coming and listening and watching on a weekly basis. I really appreciate it. Please don't forget to go wherever you find your podcasts, leave us a like, a share, a subscribe, a follow, all the stuff, because it's important. We want to keep this little thing growing and growing. So, once again, Jen, thank you so much for coming. To all you out there, I'll catch you on the flip side and see you next time.
Thanks, Simon.